A surprise journey and an unexpected encounter. It was an early Saturday morning, and the soft golden light of dawn was streaming into the large modern home Marcus Johnson shared with his 12-year-old daughter, Ava. Despite being the CEO of SkyConnect Airlines, a thriving company built on the values of excellence and respect, Marcus had always ensured that his family life came first. His days were typically packed with meetings and calls, but weekends were sacred. Today was special, as he had planned a surprise for Ava. "Dad, why are you up so early?" Ava called out, rubbing her eyes as she wandered into the living room. Marcus turned around from where he was packing a small carry-on bag. His face lit up as he saw her sleepy form standing in the doorway. "Good morning, sleepyhead. I've got a surprise for you. Pack your bag. We're going to New York City." Ava's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "New York? Are you serious?" she squealed, wide awake now. Marcus grinned, completely serious. "You've been working so hard at school, and I think it's time for a father-daughter adventure." Ava wasted no time and darted off to her room to pack. Within an hour, they were in the car, headed to the airport. Marcus loved seeing her excitement. It reminded him why he worked so hard. He wanted to give Ava a life filled with opportunities and experiences that would shape her into a kind, confident, and compassionate person. The airport was bustling, as it always was on a weekend morning. Ava looked around in wonder as they walked through the sleek SkyConnect terminal. Being the daughter of the CEO had its perks. They bypassed the long lines at security and were quickly on their way to the first-class lounge. Marcus had insisted that Ava experience everything the airline had to offer, from the lounge to the first-class cabin. Ava was fascinated. "This is amazing, Dad. I feel like a queen," she exclaimed as she sipped on freshly squeezed orange juice in the lounge. Marcus chuckled. "Well, it's all part of the experience. But remember, the most important thing about running an airline isn't just luxury. It's making sure every passenger, no matter where they sit, feels respected and valued." Ava nodded thoughtfully, absorbing her father's words. She admired how much he cared about his company and its values. When it was time to board, they were greeted by a flight attendant named Clara. She had been with the airline for over a decade and was known among her colleagues for being efficient but stern. Her smile was tight as she checked their boarding passes and gestured toward the jet bridge. Ava didn't notice anything amiss, but Marcus caught the coldness in Clara's demeanor. As they settled into their plush first-class seats, Ava pulled out her favorite book. She was an avid reader and rarely traveled without a novel to keep her company. Marcus leaned back in his seat, glancing at her with a warm smile. However, moments before takeoff, Clara approached them with a stern expression. "Young lady, you need to put that book away now," she said sharply. Ava looked up, startled. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'll put it away right now," she replied, fumbling to close the book. Before Ava could act, Clara snatched the book from her hands and shoved it into the overhead compartment with unnecessary force. "This is why we make announcements," she muttered, loud enough for both Marcus and Ava to hear. Ava's face turned red with embarrassment, and she sank into her seat, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Marcus, who had been adjusting his seatbelt, looked up and saw the exchange. His jaw tightened. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "That was unnecessary. My daughter was following your instructions." Clara crossed her arms. "I'm just doing my job. Maybe teach her to be more attentive," she snapped. Marcus took a deep breath, reining in his frustration. He decided not to reveal his identity as the CEO, for now. He wanted to observe how the situation would unfold without his position influencing it. "Understood," he replied evenly. "Let's focus on having a safe flight." Ava gave her father a small, grateful smile, but Marcus could see the hurt in her eyes. She had always been treated with kindness and respect, and this encounter had clearly shaken her. He squeezed her hand reassuringly, silently vowing to address this incident in the right way. As the flight progressed, Marcus kept a close eye on Clara. He noticed that her demeanor wasn't just directed at them. She seemed impatient with passengers who needed extra help, and her tone lacked any trace of warmth. It was disheartening. SkyConnect Airlines was built on principles of customer care and respect, and Clara's attitude was a stark contradiction to those values. Meanwhile, Ava remained unusually quiet, her thoughts clearly occupied. Marcus leaned over. "You okay, sweetheart?" Ava nodded slowly. "I'm okay, Dad. But I don't think that was right. She didn't have to be so rude." "No, she didn't," Marcus agreed. "What do you think we should do about it?" Ava's brow furrowed as she thought. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a small notebook and pen. "I'm going to write a letter to SkyConnect," she said decisively. "They should know how this made me feel." Marcus felt a swell of pride. "That's a great idea, Ava. Your voice matters." Ava spent the rest of the flight carefully crafting her letter. She described how Clara's actions had made her feel unwelcome and embarrassed, but she also highlighted the values of kindness and respect that her father had always emphasized. "Everyone deserves to feel valued," she wrote, her pen moving steadily across the page. When they landed in New York, Ava handed the letter to her father. "Do you think it will make a difference?" she asked. Marcus smiled at her. "I think it already has, and I'll make sure it reaches the right people." As they stepped off the plane and into the bustling city, Marcus couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this incident was a symptom of a deeper issue within his company. He had built SkyConnect with the dream of creating a world-class airline that prioritized people over profits. This experience was a wake-up call, one that he couldn't ignore. Little did Clara know, her actions would spark a chain of events that would not only transform SkyConnect Airlines, but also inspire a young girl to believe in the power of her voice. Behind the scenes of a storm brewing, the morning sun filtered through the towering skyscrapers of New York City as Marcus and Ava stepped out of their hotel to begin their day of exploring. The incident on the flight lingered in their minds, but Marcus was determined to give Ava a memorable trip. He didn't want one unpleasant moment to overshadow the joy of their father-daughter adventure. Yet, even as they walked through Central Park and marveled at the energy of Times Square, Marcus's thoughts kept drifting back to the airline. The behavior of Clara was not just disappointing. It was a glaring red flag. If someone like her, with such a dismissive attitude, had managed to represent SkyConnect, how many other passengers had faced similar treatment? And worse, how many had chosen to remain silent? By the time they returned to their hotel in the evening, Marcus knew he couldn't let the matter rest. While Ava was freshening up, he settled into the lounge area with his laptop. Years of experience as a leader had taught him that one person's behavior could sometimes reflect larger cultural issues within a company. This wasn't just about Clara, it was about the entire system. He opened an email to his executive team and laid out a direct and urgent message. Subject: Immediate review of passenger experience. Team: I've encountered a troubling incident involving one of our flight attendants that highlights potential gaps in our company culture. Please initiate a thorough review of passenger feedback from the past year, specifically incidents involving reports of unprofessional behavior. Additionally, I'd like us to re-examine our training programs, particularly those focused on customer service and empathy. Schedule a meeting with department heads to discuss potential improvements. We cannot afford to let this slide. Our passengers deserve the best experience, and we must ensure that every employee represents the values SkyConnect stands for. Regards, Marcus Johnson, CEO. After hitting send, Marcus felt a small measure of relief, but there was more to be done. He picked up the phone and called Daniel Tran, the airline's Vice President of Human Resources. Daniel had been with SkyConnect since its inception and was one of Marcus's most trusted confidants. "Marcus, good to hear from you," Daniel answered, his voice warm but tinged with curiosity. "What's going on? You don't usually call me on weekends." Marcus wasted no time recounting the incident on the flight. He described Clara's harsh demeanor, Ava's reaction, and his concern that this might not be an isolated event. "This isn't just about one employee," Marcus concluded. "It's about the message we're sending as a company. If even one passenger feels unwelcome or disrespected, we failed." Daniel listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. When Marcus finished, there was a brief pause before Daniel responded. "You're right to be concerned, Marcus. I'll start pulling the records first thing Monday morning. If there's a pattern, we'll find it. And if there's a gap in our training or culture, we'll address that too." "Thank you, Daniel," Marcus said, his voice steady but resolute. "This is personal for me, but it's also about protecting what we've built. Keep me updated." After hanging up, Marcus leaned back in his chair and stared at the city lights twinkling outside the window. The weight of leadership was heavy at times like these, but he was determined to do what was right. SkyConnect was more than an airline to him. It was a reflection of his values and a legacy for Ava. Meanwhile, Ava sat on the bed in her room, her notebook open in front of her. Writing the letter had been cathartic, but she still felt unsettled. Clara's behavior had made her feel small, and Ava wasn't used to feeling that way. She prided herself on standing up for others, but this time, she had been caught off guard. She began jotting down ideas in her notebook, brainstorming ways to make a difference. Her father had always taught her the importance of action, and she wanted to channel her feelings into something constructive. She considered writing a blog post about the experience, or even starting a campaign to promote kindness in public spaces. When Marcus came to check on her, he found her deep in thought. "Hey, kiddo," he said, sitting beside her. "What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking," Ava began, tapping her pen against the page. "What if we did something to encourage kindness, like a campaign or a program? Not just for the airline, but for everywhere." Marcus smiled, impressed by her initiative. "That's a wonderful idea, Ava. What did you have in mind?" "I'm not sure yet," she admitted, "but I think it should be something simple, like sharing stories of kindness or recognizing people who go out of their way to help others." Marcus nodded. "You're onto something. Kindness isn't just a nice idea. It's a powerful force, and sometimes it takes just one person to start a movement." The next day, while Ava and Marcus explored the vibrant streets of New York, Daniel and the SkyConnect team were hard at work. By mid-morning, Daniel had pulled up dozens of passenger feedback reports. A troubling pattern began to emerge. In the past year alone, there had been several complaints about flight attendants displaying impatience, rudeness, or a lack of empathy. Most of these incidents had been minor, dismissed as one-offs by the customer service department, but together they painted a concerning picture. Daniel shared his findings with Marcus via email, along with a detailed summary of the most common issues. His message ended with a blunt but honest statement. "Marcus, it's clear we have a problem. While the majority of our staff are excellent, there's a small percentage whose behavior is undermining everything we stand for. This is a wake-up call. Let's talk Monday morning about how we tackle this." Marcus read the email while Ava was taking a nap. His initial reaction was frustration. How had this gone unnoticed for so long? But he quickly shifted to problem-solving mode. He made notes for a company-wide strategy to address the issue, focusing on 3 key areas: retraining staff, creating a system for recognizing exceptional service, and fostering a culture where every passenger felt valued. As the weekend drew to a close, Marcus and Ava spent their final evening in New York reflecting on their trip. Sitting by the window of their hotel room, they watched the city lights sparkle against the dark sky. "Do you think things will change, Dad?" Ava asked softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Marcus put an arm around her shoulder. "I know they will. And it's because of people like you who aren't afraid to speak up." Ava leaned her head against his arm, a small smile on her face. "Thanks, Dad, for always listening." Marcus felt a swell of pride as he looked at his daughter. She was wise beyond her years, and her compassion was a constant reminder of why he had built SkyConnect the way he had. Together, they were ready to turn this challenge into an opportunity for growth, not just for the airline, but for themselves as well. A letter that shakes the boardroom. The morning after their return from New York, Marcus Johnson strode into SkyConnect Airlines corporate headquarters with a steely determination in his eyes. The sprawling glass and steel building was usually a source of pride for him, symbolizing the success and values that had built one of the country's leading airlines. Today, however, it was a reminder that no structure, physical or metaphorical, was unshakable. It was time to fix what was broken. In his hand was Ava's handwritten letter. Her carefully chosen words reflected a clarity and sincerity that Marcus knew would resonate far beyond the confines of her experience. He hadn't just promised to make sure her voice was heard. He intended to make it the catalyst for real change. As Marcus entered the executive conference room, the atmosphere shifted. His leadership style was typically approachable, but the intensity in his demeanor that morning left no room for the usual pleasantries. Seated around the table were the company's top executives, including Daniel Tran, the Vice President of Human Resources, and Emily Vargas, the Head of Customer Experience. They all knew the meeting wasn't about celebrating success. It was about addressing a brewing storm. "Good morning," Marcus began, placing Ava's letter in the center of the table. "I called this meeting because we have a problem that threatens the very foundation of what we stand for." The executives exchanged glances, unsure of what was coming. Marcus picked up the letter and began to read aloud, his voice steady but weighted with emotion. "Dear SkyConnect Airlines, my name is Ava Johnson, and I recently flew on one of your flights with my dad. I was really excited because he told me how amazing SkyConnect is and how it's supposed to be the best airline. But something happened that made me feel very sad. One of your flight attendants wasn't very nice to me. She snatched my book and didn't even give me a chance to follow her instructions. It made me feel small and embarrassed in front of everyone. My dad always says that SkyConnect is about kindness and respect, but that's not what I felt. I think it's important to treat people with care, especially when they're just trying to enjoy their trip. Please make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. I love what my dad says about your company, and I want to believe it too. Thank you for listening. Sincerely, Ava Johnson." By the time Marcus finished reading, the room was silent. Some executives looked visibly uncomfortable, while others seemed deeply reflective. Emily Vargas was the first to speak. "This is powerful," she said softly. "It's not just a complaint. It's a reminder of the standard we've set for ourselves and how far we've drifted in some areas." Daniel Tran nodded. "I've already started digging into our feedback reports. There's a pattern, Marcus. Not widespread, but enough to be concerning. We've had several complaints about rudeness and impatience from staff. Most of them were dismissed as one-offs, but together, they paint a different picture." Marcus leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. "This isn't just about one flight attendant or even a handful of complaints. It's about the culture we've allowed to grow. Somewhere along the way, we've lost sight of what SkyConnect is supposed to be, a company built on respect, empathy, and world-class service." The executives nodded, the weight of Marcus's words sinking in. He continued, his voice resolute. "I won't stand for this. Effective immediately, we're implementing a 3-phase plan to address these issues. First, we'll overhaul our training programs, focusing on empathy and customer care. Second, we'll create a new system for recognizing and rewarding employees who go above and beyond for passengers. And third, we'll launch a passenger feedback initiative to ensure that every voice is heard and acted upon." The meeting stretched on for hours as Marcus and his team worked through the details of the plan. Emily proposed a series of workshops for frontline staff, led by experts in emotional intelligence and customer service. Daniel suggested creating a mentorship program, where senior employees with exemplary records could guide newer staff. By the end of the session, they had a clear roadmap. Marcus felt a sense of relief, but he knew the real work was just beginning. Changing a company's culture wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Later that evening, Marcus returned home to find Ava sitting at the dining table, her notebook open in front of her. She looked up as he walked in, her eyes bright with curiosity. "How did it go?" she asked. Marcus smiled, setting his briefcase down. "It went well. Your letter made a big impact, Ava. It reminded everyone why we do what we do." Ava beamed. "Really? Do you think things will change?" "They already are," Marcus replied, ruffling her hair. "And it's because of you." While Marcus and his team worked tirelessly to implement the new initiatives, Ava continued to think about ways to promote kindness. One evening, she came up with an idea that she couldn't wait to share with her dad. What if SkyConnect started a Kindness in the Clouds campaign? She suggested over dinner. You could ask passengers and crew to share stories of kindness they've seen or experienced. You could even give awards to the best ones. Marcus was impressed. "That's a fantastic idea, Ava. Let's make it happen." True to his word, Marcus pitched the idea to his marketing team the next day, and they embraced it enthusiastically. Within weeks, Kindness in the Clouds became a company-wide initiative. Passengers were invited to share their stories online, and flight attendants were encouraged to look for moments of kindness during their shifts. The stories were then shared on SkyConnect's social media channels, creating a ripple effect of positivity. Back in the skies, Clara, the flight attendant who had sparked this entire movement, was feeling the effects of the new training program. At first, she resisted the changes, seeing them as unnecessary. But as she attended workshops and listened to passenger stories, she began to reflect on her own behavior. She realized that her no-nonsense approach, while efficient, lacked the human touch that passengers valued. One day, Clara was serving a family on a flight to Miami when a young boy spilled his juice. Instead of reacting with frustration, she crouched down to his level and reassured him with a smile. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Accidents happen. Let's get you a new drink, okay?" The boy's mother thanked her warmly, and for the first time in years, Clara felt a genuine sense of fulfillment in her job. She began to see her role not just as a series of tasks, but as an opportunity to make people's journeys a little brighter. As weeks turned into months, the changes at SkyConnect began to take root. Passenger satisfaction scores rose, and employees reported feeling more motivated and valued. Marcus knew there was still work to be done, but he was proud of the progress they had made. One evening, as he and Ava sat on the porch watching the sunset, she turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Dad, do you think kindness can really change the world?" Marcus put his arm around her shoulders. "I think it already has, Ava, and you're living proof of that." As the sun dipped below the horizon, father and daughter shared a quiet moment of gratitude for each other, for the journey they were on, and for the simple but powerful truth that kindness, no matter how small, could create ripples that reached far and wide. The ripple effect. The days following the launch of the Kindness in the Clouds campaign brought a wave of energy across SkyConnect Airlines. Marcus Johnson's leadership had reignited a sense of purpose within the company, and the employees, whether they worked in the air or on the ground, felt it. Ava's heartfelt letter, now shared internally as part of employee training, had touched everyone from executives to junior flight attendants. Her words had become a rallying cry. Kindness isn't optional. It's the core of who we are. At the heart of the change was a growing realization that every interaction mattered. Stories of kindness began pouring in from passengers and employees alike. A businesswoman wrote about a flight attendant who had stayed by her side during a turbulence-induced panic attack. A single mother shared how a gate agent had gone out of his way to entertain her restless toddler during a flight delay, and an elderly man recounted how a pilot had personally escorted him to his connecting flight when he'd been too disoriented to find the gate on his own. Each story was celebrated. The marketing team compiled these accounts into weekly social media posts, accompanied by the hashtag #KindnessInTheClouds. Within weeks, the campaign gained national attention. News outlets picked up the stories, praising Skyconnect for prioritizing humanity in an industry often criticized for being impersonal. But the campaign wasn't without its skeptics. In an online forum for aviation professionals, a heated debate arose about whether such initiatives were genuine or just corporate posturing. Among the harshest critics was Clara, the flight attendant who had been at the center of Ava's experience. "It's all a PR stunt," Clara wrote anonymously. "Passengers are more entitled than ever. They think kindness means catering to their every whim." Clara's cynicism wasn't uncommon among longtime airline staff who had grown jaded from years of dealing with demanding passengers. For her, the job had always been about efficiency and maintaining order. Yet, despite her resistance, Clara couldn't ignore the growing impact of the campaign. Colleagues began sharing their own moments of kindness with enthusiasm, and passengers started recognizing her small gestures, a smile, a comforting word, or an extra effort to assist. It made her wonder if she had been wrong all along. Meanwhile, Marcus was knee-deep in meetings aimed at reinforcing the company's new direction. His calendar was packed with strategy sessions, training revamps, and workshops on emotional intelligence. Yet, amid the chaos, he made time for something deeply personal: mentoring employees one-on-one. One day, he arranged a meeting with Clara. He hadn't directly addressed her behavior since the flight with Ava, but he knew that true change required engagement, not just mandates. When Clara entered his office, she looked nervous. She knew who Marcus was now, the CEO, the man who had built Skyconnect from the ground up. But she also knew that he had chosen not to publicly reprimand her, which left her both curious and wary. "Clara," Marcus began, his tone warm but direct, "thank you for meeting with me. I wanted to talk about the direction we're heading as a company, and about your role in it." Clara nodded, her professional mask firmly in place. "Of course, Mr. Johnson. I've read some incredible stories recently," Marcus continued. "Passengers sharing moments when our staff made their journeys unforgettable. But I also seen the other side, times when we fell short. One of those times was with my daughter, Ava." Clara's face reddened. She opened her mouth to apologize, but Marcus held up a hand. "I'm not here to rehash that incident," he said gently. "What I want to know is this. How do you see your role at Skyconnect? What does being a flight attendant mean to you?" Clara hesitated. She had been asked similar questions during interviews and performance reviews, but this felt different. Finally, she said, "To me, it's about keeping passengers safe and ensuring the flight runs smoothly. That's my priority." Marcus nodded. "That's an important part of the job, no doubt. But let me ask you this. What do you think passengers remember most about their flight?" Clara frowned, unsure how to answer. "They remember how they felt," Marcus said after a moment. "Was the crew kind? Did they feel valued, even during challenges? Safety and efficiency are non-negotiable, but kindness is what creates loyalty. It's what makes people choose Skyconnect, not just because it's an airline, but because it's our airline." Clara sat quietly, absorbing his words. For the first time, she felt the weight of what Marcus was saying, not as criticism, but as an invitation to be part of something bigger. As weeks turned into months, Clara found herself reevaluating her approach. She began making small changes, like greeting each passenger with genuine warmth or offering a word of encouragement to a nervous flyer. To her surprise, these actions didn't just improve the passengers' experiences, they transformed hers. She started to feel a renewed sense of pride in her work, realizing that kindness wasn't just a job requirement, it was a source of fulfillment. One day, while working a flight to Denver, Clara noticed a teenage girl traveling alone. The girl seemed anxious, clutching a small notebook and glancing around nervously. Clara knelt beside her seat. "Hi there," she said softly. "First time flying alone?" The girl nodded, her eyes wide. "Well, you're doing great so far," Clara said with a reassuring smile. "If you need anything, just let me know. We're here for you." The girl's face relaxed into a shy smile. "Thank you." Later, As passengers disembarked, the girl handed Clara a folded piece of paper. Inside was a simple note. "Thank you for being so kind. You made me feel brave." For Clara, it was a turning point. She realized that her work wasn't just about managing flights. It was about creating moments of connection that could brighten someone's day, or even their life. At SkyConnect's headquarters, Marcus was reviewing the latest metrics. Passenger satisfaction scores had risen dramatically, and employee engagement was at an all-time high. The Kindness in the Clouds campaign had not only enhanced the airline's reputation, but had also fostered a culture of compassion within the company. One story, in particular, stood out to Marcus. A letter from a passenger described how a flight attendant had gone out of her way to comfort her daughter, who was traveling alone for the first time. The passenger ended the letter with a powerful statement. "Your airline didn't just get us from point A to point B. You made us feel like we mattered." The flight attendant was Clara. Marcus smiled as he read the letter. It was proof that change was possible, even for those who initially resisted it. He made a mental note to personally thank Clara at the next company event. Back at home, Ava was beaming as she read through the latest batch of stories from the campaign's website. "Dad, look at this one," she exclaimed, pointing to a story about a pilot who had delayed a flight to ensure a stranded passenger could make it home for a family emergency. Marcus leaned over, reading the story with pride. "That's what SkyConnect is all about," he said. Ava grinned. "It feels good, doesn't it? Knowing we're making a difference." Marcus nodded. "It feels incredible. And it all started with your letter." As father and daughter shared a quiet moment, they both knew the ripple effect of kindness would continue to spread, touching lives in ways they couldn't even imagine. Winds of transformation. SkyConnect Airlines was undergoing a transformation that went deeper than customer service. What began as an internal initiative to address kindness and respect had grown into a movement that was reshaping the company's identity. Employees, passengers, and even stakeholders were taking notice of the airline's shift toward human-centered values. At the center of this change was Marcus Johnson. His quiet but determined leadership, paired with Ava's letter that had sparked the movement, had become a beacon of hope for those who had once seen the airline as just another business in the competitive industry. But change, Marcus knew, didn't come without resistance. As much as the Kindness in the Clouds campaign had gained traction, there were pockets of doubt and inertia within the organization. Marcus had learned long ago that leadership wasn't just about inspiring change. It was about confronting the obstacles that came with it. A meeting of minds. One morning, Marcus convened a meeting with the executive team and senior flight crew members. The goal was clear: address the growing pains of the transformation and ensure that the campaign wasn't just a flash in the pan. The room buzzed with energy as employees from different departments gathered. Emily Vargas, the head of customer experience, kicked off the meeting with a presentation on the campaign's impact. "Our passenger satisfaction scores have increased by 18% in just 3 months, she said, gesturing to the chart on the screen. And the number of complaints related to staff behavior has dropped by 30%. The room erupted into applause, but Marcus raised a hand to quiet them. "These numbers are encouraging," he said, his tone measured. "But let's not get complacent. Numbers are only part of the story. I want to hear from you. What's working, and where are we falling short?" A senior flight attendant named Sophia, who had been with SkyConnect for over 15 years, spoke up. "The campaign has been incredible for morale," she said. "But some of the longer-serving staff are struggling to adapt. They're set in their ways and see the changes as unnecessary. It's creating tension." Daniel Tran, the vice president of human resources, nodded. "I've heard similar feedback. It's not that they're against kindness. They just feel like they're being told to change who they are." Marcus leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "Change is hard," he acknowledged. "But this isn't about forcing people to be something they're not. It's about showing them how kindness benefits everyone, passengers, colleagues, and even themselves." "Sophia, what do you think would help?" Sophia hesitated, then said, Maybe more peer-to-peer mentoring. Pairing seasoned employees with those who have fully embraced the campaign might help bridge the gap. That's a fantastic idea, Marcus said. Let's make it happen. A surprise visit. A few weeks later, Marcus decided to see the changes in action firsthand. Without notifying the staff, he booked a ticket on a flight under an alias. It was a busy domestic route, and Marcus took his seat in the economy cabin, observing quietly. The flight was bustling with activity, but something caught his eye. Clara, the flight attendant who had once dismissed Ava so harshly, was moving through the cabin with a newfound warmth. She smiled as she assisted passengers, cracked jokes to ease tension during a delay, and even knelt down to comfort a child who was nervous about flying. Marcus watched with a mix of pride and relief. Clara's transformation was proof that the campaign wasn't just lip service. It was making a real difference. As the flight landed and passengers disembarked, Marcus approached Clara, revealing his identity. She froze for a moment, unsure of what to expect. "Mr. Johnson," she said cautiously, "I didn't know you were on board." "That was intentional," Marcus said with a smile. "I wanted to see the team in action. And I have to say, Clara, I'm impressed." Clara blinked, caught off guard. "You are?" "Yes," Marcus said. "I've seen a change in you, and I can tell it's genuine. You've come a long way." Clara felt a swell of pride. "Thank you, sir. I'll admit, I was resistant at first. But seeing how passengers respond to kindness, it's made me realize that it's not just about them. It's about how I feel at the end of the day, knowing I've made a difference." Marcus nodded. "That's the heart of what we're building here. Keep it up." Ava's next big idea. Back at home, Ava was brimming with excitement. The success of Kindness in the Clouds had inspired her to think even bigger. One evening, as Marcus sat reviewing reports, she burst into his home office, a notebook clutched in her hands. "Dad, I have another idea," she announced. Marcus set down his papers and smiled. "Let's hear it." "I was thinking," Ava began, flipping through her notes. "What if we created a kindness scholarship, like for kids who go out of their way to help others? You could tie it to the airline, maybe give the winners free flights or even partner with schools." Marcus raised an eyebrow, impressed. "A scholarship, huh? That's ambitious." Ava shrugged, grinning. "You always say kindness is an investment. So let's invest in the future." Marcus chuckled. "I like the way you think. Let's make it happen." A new era at SkyConnect. Months later, the Kindness Scholarship was launched with great fanfare. Dubbed the SkyConnect Future Leaders Scholarship, it recognized young people who had demonstrated exceptional acts of kindness in their communities. The winners were celebrated at a gala event where Marcus delivered a heartfelt speech. As he stood at the podium, his eyes scanned the room, landing on Ava, who was beaming with pride. "When I started SkyConnect, I dreamed of creating more than just an airline," Marcus said. "I wanted to build something that reflected the best of humanity, our ability to connect, to care, and to uplift one another. Today, I see that dream becoming a reality, thanks to all of you." The room erupted in applause, and Marcus stepped down, joining Ava at their table. "You did it, Dad," she whispered, her eyes shining. "No," Marcus said, wrapping an arm around her. "We did it." The legacy of kindness. SkyConnect Airlines became a case study in corporate transformation. The company's profits soared, not just because of its improved reputation, but because passengers genuinely wanted to support a business that aligned with their values. For Marcus, the journey was more than professional. It was deeply personal. Ava's letter had set everything in motion, reminding him of the values he held most dear. Together, father and daughter had turned a moment of disappointment into a movement that inspired millions. And for Clara, Sophia, and countless others within SkyConnect, kindness wasn't just a campaign. It had become a way of life, the summit of change. SkyConnect Airlines had come a long way since the day Ava Johnson penned her heartfelt letter to the company. What began as a simple plea for kindness had blossomed into a full-blown cultural transformation. Marcus Johnson, the airline's founder and CEO, often reflected on how such profound change had stemmed from one small but powerful voice. It had been months of hard work, challenges, and introspection, but now SkyConnect was entering a new era, one defined by compassion, inclusivity, and purpose. The recognition event. The culmination of the Kindness in the Clouds campaign was a company-wide recognition event held in a sprawling sunlit conference hall. Employees from every department, passengers who had shared their stories, and even members of the media were in attendance. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as Marcus prepared to address the audience. Ava sat in the front row, clutching her notebook and beaming with pride. At 12 years old, she couldn't have imagined that her simple letter would lead to something so monumental. She looked around the room, noticing the diverse crowd, pilots in crisp uniforms, flight attendants in their polished attire, and even passengers who had flown in just to be part of the moment. It was a testament to how far-reaching the campaign's impact had been. Marcus took the stage to thunderous applause. Dressed in his signature tailored suit, he looked every bit the visionary leader, but his words were humble. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady and warm. "This event isn't just a celebration of our success, it's a celebration of our shared values. When we launched the Kindness in the Clouds campaign, we didn't anticipate how deeply it would resonate. We've heard stories from passengers and employees that have reminded us why we do what we do." He paused, scanning the crowd. "But today, I want to share a story of my own. It's the story of my daughter, Ava, whose courage and kindness sparked this movement." The audience turned to Ava, who blushed but smiled brightly. Marcus continued, recounting the incident with Clara on the flight to New York and how Ava's letter had set everything in motion. When he finished, the crowd erupted into applause, some even standing to honor the young girl who had inspired so much. Clara's moment. Among those applauding was Clara, the flight attendant who had unknowingly ignited the transformation. She hadn't expected to attend the event, but an invitation from Marcus himself had made it impossible to decline. Sitting quietly in the back, she felt a mix of emotions: pride, gratitude, and a lingering sense of humility. As the applause died down, Marcus glanced toward Clara. "I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone who has undergone an incredible journey of her own. Clara, could you join me on stage?" Clara froze, unsure if she had heard correctly. Her colleagues encouraged her with gentle nudges, and before she knew it, she was walking toward the stage, her heart pounding. When she reached Marcus, he extended his hand, then pulled her into a warm embrace. Turning back to the audience, he said, "Clara represents what this campaign is all about: growth, reflection, and the courage to embrace change. She has become a shining example of what it means to embody SkyConnect's values." The crowd cheered, and Clara felt tears prick her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, not as someone who had made mistakes, but as someone who had grown from them. Ava's scholarship announcement. After Clara returned to her seat, Marcus turned to Ava, who was still sitting in the front row. "Ava, I think it's time you shared your idea with everyone," he said, beckoning her to join him on stage. Ava hesitated for a moment, then stood and made her way to the podium. Despite her nerves, her voice was clear and steady as she spoke. "Hi, everyone. I'm Ava," she began, smiling shyly. "When I wrote my letter, I just wanted to tell SkyConnect how I felt. I didn't know it would lead to all of this, but now that it has, I want to keep going. My dad always says that kindness is the most important thing we can share, and I think he's right." She held up her notebook, flipping to a page she had carefully prepared. "That's why I'm so excited to announce the SkyConnect Future Leader Scholarship. It's for kids who show kindness and make a difference in their communities, because I believe that the best leaders are the ones who care about others." The crowd erupted into applause, and Marcus couldn't help but beam with pride. Ava's idea had been met with overwhelming enthusiasm from the company, and the first recipients of the scholarship were already being chosen. A renewed Clara. Later that evening, Clara found herself reflecting on her own journey. Months ago, she would have balked at the idea of a kindness campaign, let alone being recognized as a model for it. But as she listened to Ava speak, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Clara approached Ava after the event, kneeling to meet her at eye level. "Ava, I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your letter, it changed me. I didn't realize how much kindness mattered until you showed me." Ava smiled, her eyes bright. "Thank you for listening. My dad says it's never too late to make things better." Clara laughed softly. "Your dad is a wise man. And so are you." The SkyConnect legacy. In the weeks that followed, the changes at SkyConnect continued to ripple outward. The scholarship program gained national attention, inspiring other companies to launch similar initiatives. The Kindness in the Clouds campaign evolved into a permanent part of the airline's identity, with every new employee undergoing extensive training in empathy and customer care. Passengers noticed the difference. Reviews flooded in, praising the airline not just for its service, but for the genuine warmth and humanity of its staff. SkyConnect wasn't just an airline anymore. It was a symbol of hope in a world that often felt disconnected. For Marcus, the transformation was deeply personal. He had always believed in leading with integrity, but seeing Ava's influence reminded him of the power of a single voice. Sitting with her one evening, watching the sunset from their backyard, he turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Ava," he said, "I used to think my biggest legacy would be SkyConnect. But now I realize it's you. You've shown me what true leadership looks like." Ava grinned. "Thanks, Dad, but I couldn't have done it without you." As the sun dipped below the horizon, father and daughter shared a quiet moment of gratitude. Together, they had proven that kindness wasn't just an ideal. It was a force capable of transforming lives, communities, and even the skies above. And though the journey wasn't over, they knew they had built something that would last far beyond their lifetimes, a legacy of compassion, courage, and change.